Good morning, everyone, and that is good morning from Trinidad and Tobago, and greetings from the Caribbean. This morning, our panel will be focusing largely on the whole element of how boys and men, and how boys become men in the fight for gender equality, gender justice, and a focus on maximizing the faculties of boys and men to generate positive change in society, regardless of where we are. It's a mixed panel, but we all have that focus. We all are activists in our own right. We all have an aim. We all want to see a positive change in society. And for that reason, we are coming together, united as one, to present you this panel. We do hope that it will be beneficial, that it will be thought provoking, that it will be appreciated, and of course, that it will be one that actually spurs on further development and continuity. It's a four-part session that focuses on how working with boys to challenge gender norms has been supplemented by working with other stakeholders that include educators and parents. Initially, such was explored using not only the Indian national language of Hindi, but also in four other regional languages. Additionally, we will discuss tools like media, arts, and pop culture that have been used to engage young men, boys, and community members. We will share some insights about how these have been used to change the cultural norms that perpetuate violence, gender-based violence against women, against less powerful men, and discrimination against us all. This is followed by an interactive method called Inhibition, Threshold of Violence. For this, the participants need paper and pens, if you have that, or you can grab that quickly. Finally, the presentation then looks at a very real and exciting possibility of partnering with corporate entities and big business to see their role in cultivating and sustaining positive masculinities. So we represent four different institutions. We have the Gender Lab, who works with adolescents in schools across Mumbai, Delhi, and Jind district of Haryana in India to inculcate leadership in girls and challenge fixed notions of gender and masculinity through an intervention with boys. We also have Breakthrough, that most powerful institution in India, excuse me. And Breakthrough works to make gender-based violence and discrimination against women and girls unacceptable. And we do so by transforming the underlying cultural norms that perpetuate it. To do this, Breakthrough uses media. Sorry, I'm now realizing there's a glow there on the sunlight. That's Caribbean sunlight for you. Sorry, yes. To do this, Breakthrough uses media, arts, and pop culture to engage with a range of audiences, including men and boys. POICA is the third institution, was founded in 2008 with regards to the rising need of young men to reflect traditional gender roles and male stereotypes. POICA offers workshops for boys and young men to support their development from child into manhood. The workshops are held in schools and social centers where boys and young men can explore and reflect their identity or identities under expert supervision. Themes with POICA range from violence prevention, gender equality, sexuality, and masculinities to job coaching and life perspective planning. And the final presentation today comes from the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies, based at St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago. The University of the West Indies has 5 campuses, and whereas most universities internationally have campuses in different cities or maybe different locations within a city, in the Caribbean, the University of the West Indies, which has been touted among the top 4 universities in the world, have university campuses in Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Jamaica, Antigua, as well as a virtual open campus. The Institute for Gender and Development Studies has been active in terms of academia and the pragmatic dimension of gender justice and gender equality. We seek to ensure that we arrive at the aim by looking at also toxic masculinity to see how that can be converted to perpetuate positivity, gender justice, and basically a very good, decent, acceptable society for boys, men, girls, and women. So today I welcome you to our panel that will focus on these elements. Our speakers are Alina and Aniket. and their presentation is How We Raise Boys. Pauline goes next, Pauline Gomes, and she's speaking on engaging adolescents to challenge and reshape gender identities. We continue with Philippe, who will speak of engaging boys against violence, and I will end the overall panel with cultivating positive masculinity, building next generation men. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, and it's a duo, so speakers. And let me just say a little about them, and they in turn will take it from here to present and then introduce the next speaker, and we will continue like that. We will invite you to launch your questions. You can place them on the chat and we'll take note of it. And after all four presentations, then we will have a question and answer feedback session, and it will be interactive then. So do jot down your questions. You are invited to participate. Write on the chat if you need to, but the opportunity will be given at the end of all four presentations to open the floor and speak directly to us, and we can communicate, all with the aim of seeing how we can transform boys into men to generate gender justice and gender equality. Aniket Wakankar has completed his education in engineering and mathematics and now works as a program coordinator in the Redefining Masculinities vertical of the Gender Lab in India. Apart from unlearning and learning the fixed notions of gender that is so crucial to construct and deconstruct as we ourselves evolve, he spends his free time listening and playing music and watching movies. Alina is a woman and a feminist and is currently coordinating the Gender Lab Boys program in Delhi. She loves to explore discourses and work around masculinities and education. Alina believes that children hold the potential to create significant changes in the world. Her vision is to build an inclusive and emphatic world. She loves watching movies and listening to stories and believes in the power it has to impact the world for better. Don't we all? And let's see how this panel could affect that in terms of what we present to make this world a better place. So Aniket and Alina, if you are ready, I hand over to you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyrone. That was really a wonderful introduction. And so I would like to welcome everybody to our first presentation, How We Raise Our Boys. I'm Aniket, as Tyrone mentioned, and with me is Alina. So diving right into it, I would like to say that stories have really been a major part of our work, and story have been the way that we communicate our everybody else as well. And here I would like to start by sharing a couple of those with you. This group from Jind, Haryana, they shared what are gender stereotypes and how they impact our lives through a simple but a very common example. That is how toys create the gender stereotypes. A group from Delhi, which we can see to our right, was able to establish the link between cleanliness and gender, and they stressed on how the load of cleanliness
Aniket,
in the house is on women.
May I interrupt? Sorry, I just wanted to announce a housekeeping that we have for anyone who wants any captioning. We have the option of live. If you go to your screen on the top, you should be able to see a red button with an arrow next to it. And if you click on that button, you will be able to see view stream. And once you click on that, the page you're taken to is where you can select your language, and that will provide you the captioning in the language that you would prefer. Sorry, Aniket, to interrupt you. I just wanted to inform everyone about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Polly. Sorry, I missed it. So as I was saying, this group of boys from Delhi were able to stress how the load of unpaid of work is cleanliness is generally on women. Here you can see an example of storytelling in our program. I mean, this group from Mumbai narrated a story around bullying using what you can see on the screen is a puppet show, which was really a really creative way of presenting their work. And the message they tried to send was really that everyone should be allowed to be themselves irrespective of any identity. To set a little bit of context to the work that the Gender Lab does, 113 million adolescent girls are an invisible population in India. And due to various socio-cultural and socio-economic reasons, they are denied autonomy and a chance to discover their potential. We at the Gender Lab are changing this narrative by empowering adolescent girls through the Avanti Young Women Leadership Program. And this program is run by the fellows at the Gender Lab Fellowship. The aim for the Gender Lab Fellowship is to empower these women and help them discover their own potential. Down the years, we realized that the conversation around gender equality will really be incomplete if we don't engage boys. And hence we started the Gender Lab Boys program. Here what we are trying to do is really help them redefine the notions of masculinity in our society, and do all of this through community action. That has been really the core of our work, service learning, but that has really been the core of our work. Going back to stories, as we started with a couple of stories, I would like to take you to another story that we all here at the Gender Lab have really come to love over the last few months. And we thought about sharing this story with you all as well. So the story is Julian is a Mermaid. The story has been written by Jessica Love. So let's go on to the story. This is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela, also what we commonly know as grandma, and those are some mermaids. Julian loves mermaids. Here is Julian getting lost in his own imagination. Here is Julian going to the very extent of his imagination and thinking about how he would himself become a mermaid, be with the fishes, and at the best of times. And then it's time for them to get off the train. Vámonos, mijo, says Abuela. This is our stop. And as they leave, Julian is still waving goodbye to those mermaids. Abuela, did you see the mermaid? I saw them, mijo, says Abuela. Abuela, I'm also a mermaid, says Julian. Abuela says, I'm going to take a bath. You be good. Now that Julian is alone, he has a good idea. He starts thinking about what he can do to become a mermaid. He looks around the house, sees things he can use to become a mermaid, sees things he can use as his tail. And just as he is getting ready, becoming a mermaid, Abuela comes back. Oh, exclaims Abuela. And Julian thinks, uh-oh. And then Abuela comes back with a necklace. For me, Abuela? Asks Julian. For you, Julian, says Abuela. And they both leave the house. Where are we going? Asks Julian. You will see, says Abuela. Mermaids, whispers Julian as they reach where Abuela is taking them. Like you, says Abuela. They do. And then you can see Ala and Julian having such a great time with other mermaids. So that was Julian is a Mermaid for you. As I said before, we have really come to love this story over the last few months, and we don't miss an opportunity to share it with everyone. And I would like to give all of us a minute to share for all of you what was the highlight of the story from Julian is a Mermaid. I would like all of you to share in the chat box what was the highlight of this story. We'll take a minute for all of you to respond to this, and then Alina will continue.
Sure. Hi everyone. Maybe we can all take a minute to reflect on the story and share what has been the highlight for each one of us. Acceptance from Abuela, grandma, the support from Julian's Abuela, the moment where he gets a necklace. Abuela was supportive. Julian was allowed to enjoy his imagination. Wonderful. Some wonderful responses are coming in. We can give it a couple more seconds if somebody else wants to type their thoughts in. Julian was allowed to enjoy his imagination, his excitement when he sees the mermaids at the fair. Amazing. Awesome. So wonderful. Thank you everyone for typing it in. I'm also kind of excited and happy to see that a lot of people have also shared how, shared that the highlight for them have been the fact that Abuela has been so supportive. Also, probably because we don't get to see that much, at least in the context where we work. So, Aniket, can you quickly move to the next slide? Right. So I would quickly share a little bit about what How We Raise Our Boys is and how it's connected to the story that we just shared. Okay, somebody has written in the chat, we're not alone. There is space for all of us in this world. Absolutely. Right. So it was in 2019 that the Gender Lab, as part of our boys program, we conducted an offline event called How We Raise Our Boys. And the idea was that while we engage with adolescent boys through schools, we also create a space where other stakeholders who constantly interact with them, including parents, teachers, caregivers, and other development sector practitioners, can come together and have conversations which wherein there can be exchange of ideas and learnings. And we continued this in 2020, recognizing the need of deliberately creating such spaces where adolescents can share their thoughts and adults can interact with them on these gender specific issues, which are a lot of which are not prioritized in our normal conversations in the context that we work in. I think it was post the coronavirus outbreak, and also a boys' locker room incident that happened in India, wherein a chat room conversation was leaked, including obscene images of girls. And this incident kind of led us to realize that, this and this incident and the dialogue of conversation that had emerged on social media post this incident led us to take a quick response and understand what the issues are and understand the nuances of these issues. So we held an online webinar series called How We Raise Our Boys around five different themes, including masculinities, consent, unpaid care work, gender stereotypes, etc. So a major learning for us from the webinar series has been that there is a strong need and want for teachers and educators and parents to come together and explore how to engage with adolescent children in these conversations, how to navigate these conversations with them. So then we took this ahead and we've been holding these conversations in regional languages because a learning for us has been that teachers, educators community is a role model for them, and understanding or creating a space for adolescents to ask questions and encouraging their questions and curiosities has been key. And we realized that having these conversations in regional languages are important because it just doesn't happen in the language that we speak, and that has been a huge gap, right? So teachers who spend time with children every day, we need to speak in the language where we speak and get together to co-create tools that we can use, practices that we can adopt within our school system to steer these conversations. Aniket, can you move to the next slide. Right. Here are a few learnings that I'd like to quickly share. Firstly, patriarchal notions and stereotypes are normalized through our schools in a multitude of ways, be it dividing different tasks to girls and boys, be it discrimination in sports, or be it like taboo associated with sex education, name it in, be it in the language that we use in schools. These kinds of notions and stereotypes are largely propagated. So it has been a learning for us to learn how that's been happening in different ways in schools. Second was teachers as role models, which I already shared about, so I'll skip that. And also we've learned different ways in which we can engage with children and conversations. We are still learning and creating that with teachers. And a key learning has been like we started our session with a story, the power of storytelling. We have so many stories, but we have a lack of stories from a feminist narrative. So the grandmother was a highlight for us from Julian's story, because we know how much that how significant her response was to how Julian gets to exercise his choices. So the power of storytelling and the need for introducing such stories to our children and the teachers and educators. So we realized that was important. uh, a question that we've been trying to address is, how do we bring in more men to actively participate in this conversations as well? Aniket, can we move to the next slide? Right. Yeah. So moving forward, I think from all these conversations and that we've had, we uh, the hope and the aim is to build a community of gender sensitive educators and teachers, and put together tools and practices that we could all use. Right. Um, we'll take I'll kind of stop here with a small question, and we'll take questions and we'll take this conversation ahead towards the last few minutes after all the presentations. Just I would like to leave everyone with a small question, which is, as teachers, as educators, as people working with young men and boys, and as caregivers who engage with children every day, what are the tools and what are the methodologies that have worked for you? We'd be very happy to receive ideas on what has worked for you, what kind of practices have worked for you to break stereotypes. And it would also be amazing if you can share if you have any ideas on how to build together a community of teachers. So I hope all of you would feel free to type it in your chat boxes. Yeah, so I'll stop here for now, and we can continue this conversation towards the last few minutes after all the presentations. Thank you so much for listening. With that, without much delay, I would like to invite our next speaker, who is Philippe. Philippe is with an organization called Poika, which was founded in 2008, and they've been extensively working on breaking traditional gender stereotypes in their context. So I would like to invite Philippe, and would love to listen your story from you. Welcome, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Elena. Hello, everyone. Yes, I start with a method. And as Tyron says at the beginning, you got some times to get a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil. Yeah, this white paper. I'll give you a minute. And while you're looking for a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil, I tell you how we will work on this method. Today, I would like to work with you on the subject of inhibition threshold for violence. Each of us have such an inhibition threshold that it prevents us from striking immediately and in any situation. But there can also be reasons and situations where this inhibition threshold is exceeded and we are ready to use physical violence. Yeah. So when you have a sheet now, like here, I ask you for your personal inhibition threshold of violence. Yeah, you make a horizontal line on the sheet. Yeah, the higher you draw this line, the more your inhibition threshold is higher. So the more difficult it is for you to get situations that you seriously threaten or use physical violence. The lower, the closer you are ready for it. And please now draw this line for yourself on the sheet. Yeah, when it's high or low or in the middle. Yeah, I'll give you a few seconds. Now, right, make a line as well, right under the line, the reasons and motives why you do not strike or do not seriously threaten to do so. I give you 2 minutes, yeah? So write down what are the reasons that you not strike or seriously threaten to do so. This method we make with boys in workshops, and therefore we would like to show up what are reasons to beat somebody up and what cannot be reasons, or how can we change this, transform these situations. I see Annika and Pauline writing, so I wait a little more for a few thoughts. And when you're ready, you write above the line those reasons, situations, or justifications for doing so, that you beat somebody up. Another minute. In Zoom, this is a good method that you don't look at the screen. You have a screen-free time, more or less. So we have enough concentration for the next 2 very interesting lessons. Okay. If you want to share your thoughts, you can fill them in a Padlet. I put the link to everyone in the chat, and you can write your ideas on the Padlet. Yeah. You click the plus in the right corner below, and then you have a field and can write on it what you did write under the line or above the line. During that, I can give you some examples what boys do in a workshop. There are boys, of course, who say somebody spit on me, but I won't hurt him, or somebody give bad words to my mom. And others say, yeah, he said bad words to my mom, and I will beat him up. So there are a lot of differences. We know that from the boys, there are a few boys say, no, there's nothing must happen that I beat somebody up, and others say, he can look at me and I will beat him up very fast. So I shared a Padlet with you so you can all see what is written. Somebody's starting. You see under the line the 2 arguing boys. They're really hard, but they talk to each other, and you see above the line the guy who beat somebody up. Of course, you're all sensitized in this field, but I think it also can be something above the line. Yeah, it's anonymous, so nobody can see who has written what, and it's very important. Also in the lesson with the boys, so they can talk anonymously about this. Because of course there are a few things, maybe, yeah, you want to protect yourself or you want to protect your family, and it's maybe normal to use violence in these cases. But in every day, it is not usable to do this. And I see something written: physical violence, threat of physical violence, repetition of things below the line, self-defense. Okay. In our workshops, every boy should hold on to this for himself, like you now. Then the boys should sit down in groups of 3 and share their drawings and compare justifications. So they can see, okay, what can I learn from the others, maybe. The boys have around 10 or 15 minutes time to talk. We don't have, because I have to hand over in a few minutes. And subsequently, the group leader asks the groups in turn and notes down common or important terms on the board or flip chart, which also shows an horizontal line, this flip chart. And in an evaluation discussion, it's then possible around the following questions. And I give you 4 examples. What was surprising? Is there a moment you think, and you're honest to yourself, of course? In this case, I would use physical violence. And do I have alternatives? Are the reasons for using violence really sufficient justifications? Are there aspects that occur both above and below the inhibition threshold? Sometimes you don't know. In situation of war, for example, in this situation, we have a lot of kids from war zones in Vienna. We have a very multicultural society here. We have people from over 100 states, and in classes, we have classes with about up to 100% kids with parents with migration background. And this is very normal in Austria and Vienna, because I grew up with this as well. Austria is in the center of Europe, so everybody come from Europe and out of Europe. And the last question is, what could help to raise the inhibition threshold as much as possible? So to rise it up. I have boys, they have it very low and say, no, it can happen. What happens? I will kick him up. I will beat him up. And of course, there are a lot of boys, and we don't always see them. They have a very high inhibition threshold. So I look again on the Padlet. Yes. Thank you very much. So, as Selina said before, we have the possibility to discuss this method afterwards. And I will now hand over to Pauline. Thank you very much for your patience, because there were a few moments very silent. So
thank you, Philip. Thank you. If you just allow me a minute, I'll share my screen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of tools that we've used to work with men and boys. And my name is Pauline, and I work with the content and development team at Breakthrough, where primarily we create different kinds of content for training and workshop purposes, for media communication as well, for engagement with different kinds of audiences, looking at focused on adolescents and addressing gender norms and building their agency, as well as leadership skills and life skills. So that's a little bit about me. I won't go into a lot of details yet, but we can take some of the questions in the question answer round. But I want to give a quick overview of what we at Breakthrough do, so that just to lay the context to the conversations about the tools. So what we do primarily is work to make a cultural shift that looks at addressing gender-based discrimination and violence against women and girls unacceptable. And we speak to a large and wide audience and where we mainstream these issues through different kinds of tools, again, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, like media, popular culture, music. And we try and break down barriers, open doors, and start honest conversations with adolescents, with young people, with family members, community members, and different sets of other ecosystems within which these adolescents are. How do we do this? We do this with the belief that to enable a change in cultural norms, it starts with us as individuals, which means that for the adolescents with whom we work, we take them through a process of learning where they are able to reflect on their own beliefs, their own cultural practices, their own behaviors, and develop the skills to be able to have conversations with family members, with their peers, with community members, and therefore affect a change and bring about a change in the larger society. And we do this through a transformation journey, also something I'll talk about a little bit more in a bit. Through a transformation journey that enables that transformation from an individual to society. We use the socio-ecological model, which looks at the adolescent as being the focus of the different kinds of interventions and engagement. And along with that, the different, etc. And therefore working with those other stakeholders, which is also critical to us.
Okay, we have to wait for a minute because Fellini left the room. Thank you very much for your patience. Somebody write to get the information from my method. We will share it with you. Just that you know.
My apologies for that. Okay. Am I audible? I'll just share my screen then. Philippe or someone, if you could tell me where I was disconnected, then I can maybe continue from there.
It was the one after the circles.
Okay. I'm not being able to share screen.
Okay.
I think you need to be made co-host again.
I think so. Oh, I am co-host. Okay.
Yeah, I can see you as co-host.
Aniket, or if someone can share the screen for me, that would be really great. So,
yeah, just give me a second, I'll do it.
Sure, I'll just continue from where I left off in the meantime. So what I was talking about is that we work with the socio-ecological model approach, which looks at adolescence as the focus of the work. And then within the different kinds of centers of influence, so if it's a school, if it's home, etc., how within that space we are able to affect the culture of change that I was talking about a little earlier. So that's how we work with adolescents and the other stakeholders in order to create an enabling environment. The other thing is that the co-ed groups that have worked quite well for us, which means that we work with groups of girls and boys in the same room when we are talking about gender, etc. And I'll tell you a story that often is quite inspiring for us. So when we were working on, in one of the states in India with a group of young boys and girls talking about sexual harassment, what happened is that some boys started saying that, so the facilitator asked them, why do you think when you whistle and when you pass comments, what do you think happens, or why do you do that? And within that conversation, the boys said that it's just passing time for us, and it's a joke. We don't mean any harm. And all this while the girls were listening, and they were quite quiet, and they were going quieter. So as the facilitators came to them, some of them very vehemently started sharing that what seems like a joke for you is actually quite impactful for us in the way that it stops us from going to school, stops us from going to the marketplaces, etc. So that's when the boys started realizing that these jokes were actually having a serious effect on people. And it might be seen as a joke for them, but it was affecting the real lives of real people who were their peers, who were their friends, could be their siblings. So those are some spaces where co-ed groups work for us. And we've also had, experiential learning in the process of some of our engagements, which looks at people being able to have these kinds of conversations in a way that each other understand their perspectives, rather than it becoming a conflict situation, which leads to just a break of communication. Building critical thinking in terms of even these boys reflecting on the fact that something that they thought as a joke actually was harming and impacting another person's life, and a real person's life, not an imagined world somewhere out there. So a set of critical thinking skills started developing where they were able to self-reflect and see what usually is seen as boys will be boys is not really that simple. Similarly, having an intersectional lens is one of the key elements that we use in all our work and tools that we do also. So very quickly, I'll just share. Aniket, if you could, thank you. So we've done an engagement for 3 years in Haryana, a state in India, with government school young people, adolescents. And again, this is where we had these kinds of conversations that I was just telling you about. And during the course of the 3 years engagement, there was a randomized control technique study that was done by JPAL, which is it's still doing, the baseline was done about 5-6 years ago now, and the end line is still continuing. I'll tell you a little bit more in a bit. And initially we found that from the first end line, which was done about 3 years ago, that the young people tended to have some amount of gender regressive views that were converted. So it was almost 16% of the participants in that program whose gender regressive views were converted. We also saw that during the course of the program, it resulted in the boys and girls being more accepting of adopting gender equal attitudes. There was also an increased aspiration among girls, where initially often they would say that they do school perhaps and then get married, but now the girls were also thinking about going into college, looking at further education. Boys also were supporting their female siblings in their families to pursue further education. So these were some of the impacts that this intervention had. And Aniket, if you could please go to the next slide. So the impact that I was talking about was, thank you, Aniket, was coming from our Taro Ki Toli program, which translates to a gang of stars. The program now is a 2-year engagement, and it believes in the what is also a program slogan, which is Teri Jeet Meri Jeet. Your victory is my victory. So if you're successful, then I'm successful, which is again looking at peer support. So this is the transformation journey of these individuals within the class, where we use different kinds of games, different kinds of activities, and quite similar to Julian's story that Aniket just shared a little while ago. We also use storytelling, and we have these young people create stories from around them, where they look at these stories then and examine the differences among experiences of the their own classmates and their own peers. What it does is also not just to examine the norms of gender around them, but also look at the different kinds of ways in which they can support each other, the different kinds of intersectional lens that comes with their gender identity, class or caste identity, etc. We've also used games which help them to build team building among themselves. So when they are looking at supporting each other, they have strategies of how they can recognize each other's strengths and qualities and then work together to be able to raise their voices as a collective. We've had role-playing activities where they literally enact the role of a parent or a care provider to be able to have these conversations with them, which helps them change gender norms, which helps them even stop early marriages. We've had young people who've gone into their classmates' houses and engaged in a conversation with the parents to discourage them from discontinuing the education of their classmate. So those are some of the ways in which we engage through storytelling, through games and role plays. And the age group with which we are doing this is between 11 to 18 years adolescents. Besides this transformation journey through training, we've also used different methodologies, which is games with, Aniket, if you could please go to the next slide. So we've had games with adolescents where menstrual hygiene management, menstruation is also been addressed through the games, and primarily with adolescent girls. This was based on a baseline study where we got information from these young girls who felt like their bodies were dirty or they were dirty. They had low self-esteem just because of the different kinds of messages and myths and taboos that existed around them. So the game helped to give them information as well as address some of these myths. And through the game also, we tried to address the stigma and the issues of shame that they had. So the game literally is on the lines of dog and the bone. And at the end of it, they end up creating a slogan that reinforces their belief in their own bodies, their bodily integrity, and therefore, is able to start breaking some of the stigma that they face because of the messages that they get around them. Aniket, if you could take me to the next slide, please. So I just want to quickly show a film, and let me see if I can share my screen.
मैं हूँ पिंकी
और मैं हूँ पंकज। हम दोनों क्लास 10th में पढ़ते हैं।
पंकज मेरा बेस्ट फ्रेंड है, हम पड़ोस में रहते हैं। जब हम छोटे थे ना, तब से इसे जानती हूँ। अब बड़ा हो गया है, लेकिन है वैसे का वैसा, सारा टाइम बक।
दोस्तों, ये तो पैदा ही टीचर हुई थी, पूरा दिन डांट डपट। आज भी वैसी है, ये मत करो, वो मत करो, ये सही है, वो गलत है।
अच्छा, ऐसा क्या बोला मैंने?
तू तो कभी किसी को कुछ कहती नहीं है। वो तो बस पड़ोस के सारे लड़के तुझसे ऐसे ही डरते हैं।
काम ही ऐसा करते हैं।
काम करते तो बेचारे डरते ही क्यों, वो तो काम करते ही नहीं है।
अच्छा, तो तू मेरी खिल्ली उड़ा रहा है।
ये देखो, खूंखार टीचर।
अच्छा, तो मैं कुछ बोलूं ही ना। घर पे पड़े पड़े मूंगफली खाते रहोगे तो जरूर बोलूंगी।
अरे तुझे औरों से क्या लेना?
क्यों नहीं लेना, सर पे चढ़ा रखा है लड़कों को। लड़के ना हुए बाजरे की कलगी हो गए।
अरे जब बड़े हो जाएंगे तब काम करेंगे ना।
और तब तक घर में भी तो हाथ बटा सकते हो ना। मेहमान आए तो चाय पानी दे सकते हो, कभी बाबूजी को ला रोटी दे सकते हो, माँ और बहन के साथ पानी ला सकते हो। कितने छोटे छोटे काम होते हैं घर में, तू भी तो करता है।
मैं तो स्पेशल लड़का हूँ, नाम है पंकज।
कोई स्पेशल वेशल नहीं है, तू नॉर्मल है।
मुझे तो खुद ही लगता है मैं नॉर्मल हूँ, पर बाकी के सब लड़के मजाक उड़ाते हैं मेरा।
उड़ाने दे, ना खुद करना ना औरों को करने देना।
तू चिंता मत कर पिंकी, मैं उनकी बातों का बुरा नहीं मानता। मुझे नहीं लगता कि मैं गलत करता हूँ। लड़कों को घर के काम करने चाहिए, बिना हिचक, बिना शर्म। इससे वो कोई कम लड़के नहीं हो जाते। क्यों, ठीक है ना लड़की?
चल इसी बात पे दे ताली।
आपका घर आपका अपना है, चाहे आप लड़के हों या लड़की। घर के छोटे बड़े कामों में दोनों को ही मिलजुल कर हाथ बटाना चाहिए। इससे कोई कम या ज्यादा नहीं हो जाता। साथ साथ काम करने से तो प्यार बढ़ता ही है। अगर घर वाले न समझे तो उन्हें प्यार से समझाएं। अपनी सोच, अपनी जिंदगी को नया रुख दें। आपकी जिंदगी आपकी अपनी है।
Thank you for that, Philip. So, as I was saying, the two characters that you saw, Pinky and Pankaj, are the adolescents who are in the same age group as the adolescents with whom we work. And they have a bit of a background story where they are, thank you so much for that comment. Grown up together, they have this friendly banter in which they talk. And you would have probably gathered from the video, there are different kinds of norms that are related to gender that is being addressed. So this is one of the tools that we've used, and the Pinky and Pankaj are the two characters who are mascots. And a lot of these stories have come from the adolescents and through the course of our engagement with them, which we've turned into these kinds of videos and audio episodes. Which then help us to engage in conversations with these young people, and at community events, take it to the community members, different community members, with whom, we can then have these conversations of how can they make that environment enabling, where these young people are able to engage in these conversations, they're able to raise their voices, support each other. How can parents and the school systems support each other? So these are ways in which we've used this video. Philip, if I do have time, is it possible to show the other one? And then, may I quickly show the other video? If you could share it also, then after that I can wrap up.
ये टोन चेंज कर दो।
क्यों मॉम?
बदल दो।
पर क्यों?
क्योंकि रोज जब मैं ऑफिस जाती हूँ, कुछ लोग मुझे देखकर ऐसी ही सीटी मारते हैं और मैं सीटियों से थक गई हूँ।
Share your story with your son. Don't let what happened to you happen to another woman. To share your story, click on this link.
Thank you for that, Philip. So this is another kind of video that addresses the, which is called Share Your Story. It is a part of a campaign that we did on media. And we've used this again with different kinds of audiences to talk about the culture of silence, to talk about the fact that if we share our experiences of sexual harassment and other different kinds of gender-based discrimination and violence within our own families, we're able to also then break the the notion where things like this happen to the other, happen to someone else, or even recognize the fact that a ringtone is something that is offensive. So similarly, if you look at the fact that sometimes we do crack what we see as jokes, but perhaps is sexist in its manner, or offensive towards different kinds of groups of people. And so these are conversations that these kinds of videos and the campaigns that we've run has enabled us to have. And we've used these again through our training programs, and we've used it at community engagement programs, where we've spoken to parents on how do you, especially women, on how do you start talking about your experiences within the homes, especially when we tend to talk usually at homes. We'll talk to our sisters or mothers, etc., and share about these kinds of experiences. But very rarely do we do it with boys, with our fathers or cousins or brothers, etc., to tell them that this was offensive or this bothered me. Well, there's another aspect to it, which of course is that there would be a backlash. But the idea is to start sharing, so that at least the recognition of something like a whistle or a comment, or just following somebody down the road is threatening enough. Like I said, initially when we had these mixed groups of girls and boys, um, when we had these mixed group of girls and boys, they would talk about, the boys were talking about it, about their sexually harassing behavior as a joke, or a small activity they were doing to just pass time during a leisurely activity, and how it impacted. So therefore, those kinds of recognitions are something that videos like the Share Your Story helped us achieve. So that was basically some of the tools that we've used. We've also used forum theater, but I think since I've run out of time, we can perhaps I can talk a little bit about those if we have time at the end of the session. But I would really like to thank a few people who've shared, the comments in the chat and appreciate the videos. Thank you so much for the appreciation. It's encouraging. And with that, I'd like to introduce Tyrone, who's the next speaker. He is a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and he will be talking with a bit of a forward-looking aspect, where he'll be exploring how we can do work with unlikely partners, and talk about masculinities and similar issues that we've been talking about in this panel. So over to you, Tyrone.
Thank you, Pauline. And let me just get a few seconds to share my screen. If you wish to continue until I get done, that's fine, Pauline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyrone. So while Tyrone is setting up, I would like to quickly, I was talking about do you want me to go, Tyrone, or?
You can finish off what you want to say, and then we can. Yeah.
So we've been using forum theater also to, give people some strategies, especially young people, some strategies about how do they engage in conversations at home. And these have helped. So there's been a young person who's been able to play one of the main characters' role, and then go back home and use similar kinds of dialogues to have her father convinced not to get her elder sister married. We've had government officials take on some of these roles in the play, and then be able to use some of those as talking points in their meetings to inspire others to raise their voices against early marriage. So those are some of the other tools that we've used. And again, sorry, Tyrone, for eating into your time, but we can discuss this more in later when we come to the question and answer round as well. Thank you, Tyrone.
Thank you, Pauline. And before I continue, am I being heard? Can someone indicate to me? Yeah, Pauline?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just begin now. I am Tyrone Ali, and I am from the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at UWI St. Augustine, and my presentation is on cultivating positive masculinity. And my presentation comes at the tail end that kind of dovetails nicely with all the other three presenters here, because we're talking about how boys become men and exhibit that drive and be on that trajectory for positive masculinity. And I want to share with you a success story that would have taken place here in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, this concept itself of building next generation men, right, has emerged out of a merging of a corporate entity's desire for positive change among masculinities and a gender-sensitive drive for transforming young men of diverse backgrounds in Trinidad and Tobago. It is twofold. Initially, the concept speaks to a brutally honest reflection of the lived social realities of selected young men who grapple with issues of power relations, gender insensitivity, and a lack of accountability as their forte daily. And secondly, it speaks to a structured program that can be used to assist such young men and others in the process of cultivating positive masculinity through mentoring, gender communication and training, the provision of psychosocial support, and the availability of academic and vocational training. Now, why do we need this? So let me just briefly give an overview. the whole notion of toxic masculinity is pervasive, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but the Caribbean, across the global south. If you look sharp, it's internationally. We feel it in different ways, in different dimensions, and less powerful men, girls, and women are often the victims of toxic masculinity in their diversity. But Caribbean women have stepped up to the plate, and feminists, both male and female, have tried to effect change. In so doing, that was the impetus for First Citizens, a multi-billion dollar US dollar company, a business entity in the industry, in the financial industry of the Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, has stepped up to the plate to pick up the mantle to generate positive masculinity through a series of steps and a program that will effect positive change. But we need to know why we are going towards something, and that is because of what exists today, which is toxic masculinity. And these are just some newspapers heading, recent, extremely recent. If we speak of this month and maybe January, right, of toxic masculinity really being a daily phenomenon in the lives of all of us, prevailing throughout. But has there been any impact to effect change? Initially, Caribbean feminists carried the mantle of women's rights, and gradually it evolved into the drive for gender justice and gender equality. And to arrive at that, we actually need a focus on boys, a focus on men. So we've had them of various generations. We've had Peter Weller, who is in Carryman and part of Men Engaged, Colin Robinson as male feminist, but we've had female feminists, Rhoda Reddock, right, Patricia Mohammed, and even currently the younger generation like Gabrielle Hussein, right, Tonya Haynes. And if you are seeing a diversity of races and ethnicities on my screen, it is because that is what the Caribbean is. It's a melting pot. It's a crucible of races, religions, ethnicities, cultures. So it is a true, in Trinidad terms, we would say a kalaloo, which is a mixing, a blend of not just plural societies, but what we call the Creole societies. So with the role of the Caribbean feminists, right, industry had the impetus to effect change. So we went beyond activism and decided to cooperate with to partner, with the corporate sector. And First Citizens is a corporate citizen itself, an entity that is well known, has a solid legacy for performance, and most importantly, is an entity that decided that, yes, we need to stop what is happening with toxic masculinity and effect positive change. First Citizens has a proven track record of national upliftment and support in every area. They are open-minded and innovative in business, commerce, banking, industry. They carry a 21st century perspective regarding Caribbean development and sustainability. And I dare say that what works for the Caribbean can work across all regions of the global south, because together we share that notion of being a post-colonial region, right, having been colonized in years gone by, but now shaping our own identity as we plod along in the 21st century. First Citizens has been a pioneer in a multiplicity of social, cultural realms. So they support sport, they support culture, right? They support young and old, they support male and female, and they are deeply interested in gender justice and role reversal of toxic masculinity. So First Citizen is maybe the ideal entity for activists in gender studies to target, because they've been partnering with males throughout in all different dimensions, in sports, right, in education, in national upliftment. And it is because of that and the impetus that gender activists have had over years, and this is the message I want us to glean from my presentation, that it can be done. And too often...
Sorry, Tyrone, that I interrupt you.
Sure.
The people ask for the slides. They won't see that they're moving. Did you change the slides?
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah, we don't see it. We just always see the start slide. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, can you, Philippe, turn my slides for me?
Okay, I try my best.
All right, so moving from the title slide, you will go to the overview, but I would have been turning the slides, yes, and you would have been hearing me, yeah?
Sorry, Tyrone, could you repeat that question, please?
Were you guys hearing me, or do you want
We
to
could hear you. No, we
Okay,
could
good.
hear you, just the slides weren't moving.
Okay, great. Philippe, are you turning the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so you are in the overview slide right now, yeah?
Right.
There's some sort of technical glitch. I'm not seeing what you are seeing. So are you on the slide that says overview? I can see. I wonder if I can turn that. Okay.
It's okay for everyone? Okay.
Right. Are you on the overview slide? Yeah, Philippe?
The next one?
Okay, go to the next one, yeah. I spoke about the overview of this piece. I spoke about toxic masculinity. Can we go on? Those are the faces I wanted to show about Caribbean feminists. So I covered that. Why citizens? Go on. I think we are here. I'm here. Okay, right. So the actual drive of activists like all of us, like Pauline, like Alina, Annika, Philippe, and all our sectors would have impacted industry in such a way that these mega corporate entities decided to stop and say, we cannot go on. For the sake of our boys, for the sake of our men, for the sake of our girls and women, for the sake of our wider society, something needs to be done. First Citizens has a track record of being gender sensitive. It's been about a decade that they stepped into it, which is fairly late considering toxic masculinity has been with us for so many more years. But they stepped in about a decade and they had a drive to promote women. This eventually led to a conference on girls. And then just a year ago, there was, along this trajectory, a focus on boys. So there was a First Citizens Symposium. Philippe, can I go to the next slide, please? Right, and the keynote speaker was someone who identified with the Global South. Ben Hurst, who has a track record for engaging in workshops where boys and men will be groomed in gender equality. Ben Hurst, who lived and had a testimony and wanted to share his message of a toxic masculinity program and how we do not need to be a disenchanted people, but we could rise above it and effect positive change. He's known for the Good Lad Initiative and had several TED Talks across Europe. Is partnering with various colleges across the UK in terms of student initiatives. And he also set about a very innovative sex education charity. Can we move on, Philippe? So what would be the rationale for a symposium like this? Gender activists, like all of us, decided to jump on the bandwagon once First Citizens decided to partner with us to promote positive masculinity, right? And we saw what was necessary. Toxic masculinity prevails. Murder, rape, just basic disrespect. Pauline showed us a most powerful video, just what was seemingly an innocent catcall that affected that young man's mother so much that she had a conversation with him, and his confused state at the end was dissonance because he never thought something as trivial as that in his mind would have impacted his mother and females so much. And that is the essence of it. We don't have to always rely on rape and murder and kidnapping to actually see toxic masculinity. It is prevailing in everyday life across our societies. So that was a part of the rationale. Then the whole notion of what is fatherhood and how men actually set the tone for male gender socialization of boys who become men and fathers. The symposium was necessary to speak to the notion of family life, right, of single mothers and their challenges and how they could cross barriers, and the whole overall notion of male gender socialization as boys become men. Philippe? And this was a sample activity. I just shots off it. I know it's fairly dark, but it was purposely done, this symposium I'm talking about, in one of the 5-star hotels in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is just a breakout room where boys from all walks of life and adolescents decided to be a part of it to effect change. Now, this has been highly instrumental. I spoke about the brutal honesty of these boys. What were they saying? They give testimonies of having been in the wrong path, even from boyhood, of being involved in petty crime, of robbery, not having a mentor to follow, which is so crucial. We are all in the business of gender activism, but we sometimes forget that boys cannot do it alone. They need mentorship. There were no role models, and this was their testimony. No sense of direction, and it was far easier to make a quick dollar by robbing and stealing than by applying themselves diligently to hard work. They all engage in disrespect of women. They actually may not at times disrespect women, but their friends disrespected and they did not stop their friends, which means by complicity, it continued in something negative. They felt that it was a rite of passage to disrespect women, and their masculinity was so fragile that if they did not do it, they would not pass as masculine. Those were the testimonies. Philip, can we go on? So the symposium covered all of that, and it had a great impact. There was national applause and a collective sigh of impending relief. There was potential for changing the trajectory of toxic masculinity in the Caribbean. The symposium was the beginning of the acute partnerships among the corporate sector in the country and governmental industries, right? Community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations, and gender justice activists. There was growing interest among male youth and adolescents who were interested in change, who saw a messiah of sorts outside of the trajectory that they were on. Boys and men were beginning to believe in themselves. There was male articulation of their possible roles in gender transformation. There was roots of gender sensitivity and the need for gender justice among male youth. I'm trying to say how the symposium, spearheaded and funded by a corporate entity, actually brought to reality the dream and aspiration of gender activists when it comes to toxic masculinity. And perhaps the most or the greatest impact of all, Philippe, right? What was this being a corporate citizen, fully funded, recurring, so it's not a one-off, recurring 3-year program for young men across Trinidad and Tobago. The program would be marked by a holistic approach to generating positive masculinities in this society and to centering the goal of building gender equality and equity through the following strategies. So this is what the program enveloped and envelops because it's ongoing. Gender communication and training, psychosocial support for our young men, critical thinking and problem-solving skills and competencies, opportunities for them to actually stop, reflect, and see where they went wrong and engage in positive growth. The provision of academic and vocational guidance. Now, this is crucial because too many times we want to effect change, but we cannot do that because we don't give, right? I think gender negotiation is also gender reconstruction, which is a partnership. One hand has to give, one hand has to receive. So boys were seeing something coming out for them, right? Because they are getting an opportunity to boost their academic and vocational skills, right? There was a provision by this program of economic and financial incentives. So there was a motivation of sorts for boys to enroll with the possibility of changing their whole perspective. And the major impact, again, goes on to show the creation of an identifiable network of individuals who are committed to mentoring and leading change. So what were the major components of this program? Philippe? Basically, it's fourfold. There was training in a way, I'm saying was because the program started a year ago, stemming out of the successful symposium, stemming out of the action of gender activists everywhere, right? And but also is because the program is recurring. There's training in a range of expertise. So listen to what these boys benefit from. Gender, behavioral psychology, counseling, and meditation, among others for the young men. They enroll in a customized program of placement, academic or vocational enhancement, and other needs that are being worked out for each young man and his own set of extenuating circumstances. So it's tailored for each boy to grow, to become a man, to be something worthwhile in society. The young men will be provided with a series of support mechanisms. Listen to this now, including peer mentorship with committee members, first citizen male role models, and this is the bonus. We have broken the barrier of moving from just gender activism to getting a corporate entity to work with us. But not only that, the corporate entity actually had male members of staff who are not gender trained, but saw the value of gender training and gender sensitivity, and they volunteered to become mentors for these young boys. So gender activists were training them in actual gender sensitivity, gender relations, gender equity, gender justice, and they were in turn training their young boys. But more than that, they impacted actually their co-workers. So you see how it's a ripple effect, and that spreads across society. And that was the positive thing there, right? So it's FC, First Citizens, male role models, counseling support, expert guidance in areas that they would like to excel in, and peer group solidarity. It is a customized program of activities, placement, or voluntary exposure that made each young man determine. You know what is this thing about this program? Each young man in an auditorium or each young man in a small room felt that this was something for him. It empowered these young men, right? And they grew with it. They felt a personal connection, and it had an impact on their family lives. Philip, can we go to the next slide? Because their actual families were testifying of change in behavior. Their actual families were talking about how there's a turnaround, and what fathers and mothers and caregivers were fighting for all the time has been materialized. What is the didactic bonus? I say not just a bonus, but didactic, because there's a teaching element to it. First Citizens, male employees are the change agents here. And through their interactions, both with the selected young men and with their interactions in their workplace among peers, including both male and female workers, because both male and females enable toxic masculinity. So there's a need to target both. And with their leadership roles in community and society. So actually, these mentors and change agents benefited personally and professionally. The advisory committee of this whole actual program and a group of professionals have oversight and bring training and other skills to this group. They are also subject to orientation and training. They serve in mentoring and logistical success of the project as well. And they continue to evaluate and measure the impact of this project. Can we go on, Philippe? I know I have just 2 minutes again, so I'll finish. But the major outcomes so far, measurable ones, have been tripartite. We saw the specific rewards coming to the candidates participating. And that was in terms of behavioral development, academic vocational training, and entrepreneurial skills. The major outcome for First Citizen was the generation of it being a successful corporate model, and that is big in industry, in business, yeah? But they became a successful corporate model across the Caribbean and across global South territories that is being tried and tested for its own measurable outputs, thus establishing a model that can be successfully replicated for increased impact among more young men across this world. And of course, there was an awareness of how this model of change spills over to benefit communities and the societies, because our trainees, our trainers, our change agents, and our boys actually belong to this territory. All right. So can I go to the last slide? Right. So why this program? It offers a holistic and affirmative approach to viewing men and masculinity, rather than beginning with the assumption that masculinity is at risk. The boys empower themselves here. It encompasses a range of skills training and work and life mentorship that will impact life choices. It reflects a strong partnering attribute that is manifested in various ways. Yeah? Partnering to achieve a common goal, partnering in a drive to achieve gender equality, partnering to positively impact self. And basically, partnering is what gender is about. Philippe, the next slide, please. Right? Because it helps, you see, in cultivating partnerships to actually promote cultivating positive masculinities. Partnership is anchored in gender awareness and gender equality in ways that could positively transform boys and young men. And in so doing, right, they become the stone that the builders of traditional and existing mentorship programs have rejected. That is placing masculinity in opposition to femininity, but rather to see both as relational concepts where one informs the other. In effect, this program holds the promise of centering masculinity and manhood as pivotal considerations in gender equality, and with a distinctive capability of more than simply making boys into men. Rather, it makes boys partners in gender equality and next generation men characterized by positive masculinity. Philippe, I thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you everyone who's put in their ideas, thoughts in the chat box. So I guess we all can take in questions right now and open up the room for conversations and dialogue. And we have 30 minutes for that. And there's Philippe, Pauline, or Tyrone, if any of you wants to add something. Aniket.
You have to raise hands up by the reaction so we can unmute you, because you can't be unmuted. You cannot unmute yourself.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, so please just raise your hands or let us know if you have a question.
There is a comment, Alina. I'm trying to read it. It's a bit of a long comment. It says, okay, it says, all wonderful work that you're doing. I think it's important to talk about feminism and people to understand what it is and why we can work together. It's so often a dirty word. I chat about it a lot. I agree with you for this comment. It's seen as a dirty word, often something that's seen in terms of usually within certain circles only acceptable. Otherwise, it's looked down upon. That's true. I, in fact, was thinking, or rather had a question for Alina and Aniket from their presentation. I have to say I love Julian and the whole idea of Abuela being so supportive. So I was wondering if you all have had challenges in using the story in places like Haryana in India, and what are some of those challenges? How have you been able to overcome them, or what has worked best to address them?
Thank you, Pauline, for the question. Yeah, so Julian is one of the stories that we've been using, and it is definitely, there is something in the story which connects to men and boys across the world. So we've been using it in different contexts. And we've also been using other resources, other stories which are more contextual. So a story like Julian is a mermaid is not something that would work or that would be relatable, for people in Haryana. So we've been using different stories or more contextual examples. And we specifically chose Julian is a mermaid story for today's presentation, also because it kind of brings a small essence of what we've been trying to do and the significance of what we've been trying to do with teachers and educators, because caretakers, teachers, educators, parents, we have so much power to bring in, become positive role models, and have the power to bring in such significant amount of change in the lives of children, which is why I wanted to bring that story here. Yeah, so a lot of videos, a lot of other stories, so we've been able to explore in the chat box also. I think we've got a couple of suggestions that we could use as well. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Right. I think apart from that, I can also share a little bit about the challenges before Aniket can add on to it. I think it definitely has been a wonderful experience working in different regional languages and trying to take these conversations into different contexts within India, because even when we talk about masculinity, it's masculinities, right? There are different of masculinity. So something which is considered masculine in Haryana is probably a little bit different from what's considered masculine in a state like Kerala or in New Delhi, right? So we've had to create spaces where we can co-create with the participants or with the teachers themselves and understand what is the context and the need of the context, and then come up with tools or practices that we can use. So it has definitely been challenging, but we've also been trying to learn and create that with the teachers. So that has been like one way of addressing that challenge. Yeah.
Thanks, Alina. I think there's a question for Tyrone in the chat box.
Sure, I'm seeing it. Pauline, you hearing me, yeah?
Yes.
Are you here? Okay, great. So the question is from Cher Arigan. how would you see that program transitioning, or just went, into the prison system? Yeah. Okay. Basically, it can work. First of all, we believe anything can work. Anything with a success story has the potential to work. And I think one of the things would be that there's an understanding that every single male prisoner was once a cute little baby boy, you know? And we would appeal to that notion in the first place to let them see value and actually let them see that somehow they followed a particular path, and not in a judgmental, critical way, right? But we need them to buy in, first of all. And actually, the same boys who are being groomed in our program of positive masculinity at present will become the agents of change. Because these are the young boys who came out of that kind of similar lifestyle, some of them, I would say, right? Who, if they had continued without this intervention, could have ended up in prison. So I think using these boys as agents of change and their testimony and how profound it has been in their lives can be the agency needed to effect positive change in the prison. The fact that the prisoners also have their relatives, right, and kin, whether it's real kin or fictive kin on the outside walls, who actually want, right, their actual person who's in prison to change, to be rehabilitated. We can partner with them so they can also be agents of change and the voice to show that this thing can work, right? First Citizens as an entity is interested, but First Citizens would have had a ripple effect on other corporate citizens in our society. So there's national buy-in, and I think pooling resources can actually streamline a particular project that can be targeted to the prison. Right, so I think it could work. Some brainstorming, some agents of change being incorporated. And I also think that we should not just assume that prisoners don't want to change. Of course, we know a male prisoner can be an extremely toxic institution where there is even a greater pressure, right, to have one-upmanship and or even to maintain the status quo and a strict policing of masculinity. But that doesn't mean it cannot be done. I believe it can be done. I believe we should also start from the assumption that these people were once like us. And I would also say, I would dare say, that there are prisoners who they themselves want to change. So I think it can be done. Thank you.
Right. I think there's a question for Tyrone and us. So the question is, do people have challenges with male parents of participants, as in resistance and retribution for boys and young men and girls? Right. So thank you for this question, first of all. I think so as part of our of the workshop or the conversations that we do with boys in schools, one of our components is also engaging with stakeholders within the school. So when we were doing offline before COVID, we used to keep workshops or have workshop component for both teachers and parents of the participants. So an interesting observation in the parents workshop is that usually the fathers the fathers of the participants, turnout would be very less, because that's something, like going for a meeting at school, it's something that the mother does. So and then we specifically introduce a component of fathers workshop. So it has been challenging to get fathers in a room to actively talk about these topics and have conversations around gender. So it definitely had been challenging, and we have had faced resistance with respect to having these conversations with boys, or we've had stakeholders including teachers and parents also share that see, this is making the program is making girls feel talk more, and I mean they're getting a voice, right? And what are you doing, like what is happening, and it has been unsettling. So yeah, so we've been facing challenges, and I think one way to go with it was to try different ways of engagement, to try getting across these ideas, and to try having this workshop designed in a way which addresses their concerns, and it talks in context and what's relatable to them, and then take it from there. Yeah, so it definitely has been challenging. Yes. Yeah. Would Tyrone like to answer that question too?
Sure. In terms of our particular program, now remember this program that I presented today is a particular program, right? Outside of that, we have similar programs in terms of gender sensitivity in the schools, let's say, for males and females in orphanages, even in society, community groups, that kind of thing. But with reference to this particular program, we have had a very minimal amount of resistance. In fact, quite the converse, right? A number of parents have actually asked us for their boys to become enrolled in the program because they see what could happen. And remember, most right-thinking parents want better for their offspring than what they had. So if they are aware of threats to their boys in society, and if they are aware then of opportunities to change behavior, they jump on that bandwagon. So we've had a positive dimension in terms of the parents or caregivers. A lot of these boys, as you may be able to assume as well, who enroll in the program also come from single parents families and also come from families where there are no parents, but maybe a grandparent or some other relative taking care of them. And there is support on the family background there for that kind of thing. But in terms of resistance, when we have had resistance, it was, and I would say this, it was initially that kind of bravado that men project an image that men are in charge, that men are dominant, that men are decision makers, and men are dictatorial. And gradually we knock and chip at that wall where these men see, and I think the proof is in the eating of the pudding. When they see changed behavior and actually how boys who could have gone the wrong path the rest of their lives and become men like that, when they see those boys change, they themselves give in and accept. And you know, the resistance is a good thing because we were able to convert that into a testimony and they themselves become agents of change. And I think all of us would agree when it comes to gender justice and the fight for gender equality, as many as we can have on our wagon going down that road, we will accept. So I think it was for a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrone. I think it would also be interesting if you could also listen to Philip if he has any thoughts on this, or we can maybe pass on to other questions if we don't. So, Philip, do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah. In Austria, our work is well known. We are about doing this work for several years, and sometimes parents call us or call me and not so happy with our work because we talk about violence, we talk about gender roles and sexuality. We make talks with the boys so they get to know a better knowledge about sexuality, and in several families it's a problem, kind of religion thing, or because they don't want them to get a connect with it. But in times of pornography, we have to do this stuff. Yeah. When parents did not, we will raise up boys that have a form of sexuality that is very problematic and will hurt themselves and hurt, of course, women and girls. And therefore, I talk to the parents and explain our work. And as you said, yeah, it's a part of gender equality and why there's resistance. It's a benefit for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. I just wanted to add to what Philippe also said in terms of something that's worked for us, because again, when we are talking about gender and we're talking about norms being changed by young people, there is a fear of the backlash from the parents. And often it is about girls being able to speak up in the houses where the voices of the girls are often not encouraged. it's not recognized, their agency is not recognized. So we've also developed this product which we call the Reflection Journal, and along with it we have this engagement community event that we do over different periods of time through the engagement. And in that we try to have both parents and young people in the same space where these young people share what they've been learning. So parents also get to hear their own children and their voices, plus learn about their aspirations. So those are some places also that has helped us. Besides it, I mean, like I was also saying during my presentation, we do work with parents and other community members, where like Philippe and Tyrone and even you said, we talk to the parents about the programs and what is that kind of journey their children are going to go through. How will it make it a better space for them as well? How their children, especially the girls, can be a great support for these parents. So those are some ways in which we've been able to, if backlash is perhaps the correct word, I'm not entirely sure, but those are some of the ways in which we've been able to create this enabling environment where some of this backlash can be addressed. Thank you. I saw another question. It's to anyone in the panel. How do you tackle reproductive roles in your program? For example, initiation rites, passage to adulthood, impacts both boys and girls differently. How do you sensitize religious community leaders, parents, to sensitize the process of these rites? Toxic masculinity and the model femininity, so to say, strengthen after the initiation rites in most cases. Anyone who would like to take that?
Yeah, I can say something short to it, and I have to excuse my English to everyone. In Austria, there are also groups, or in Europe, there are also groups of men work handle or to deal with these initiations, and to say, okay, men have to fight, men have to jump over the fire and play football and stuff. And we don't do this because we say every boy has different interests, and we build them up to boys. But we deal with this initiation. So we talk about it. As I said before, we have a lot of kids from Muslim community, and maybe some religious stuff, and they say, okay, I'm a man, I have to do this because my religion says this. And then we talked about this, and we always ask the questions which are important in religions and in philosophy, and for us all, I think, where I am and where I come from and where I want to go to, and what do I want from life. And we don't talk about these religious issues. We don't talk about Allah or Yahweh or something else. We talk about the boys by themselves and say, what do you think about this? Yeah. And when they say, yeah, but my father says this and my mother says this, and say, yeah, but what do you think about it? And I think this is a very important process, and it's a long-term process. So you can't get results in 1 hour. Yeah, we have to start. We have to get in touch with them. We play some games and we laugh. Yeah, fun is also very important. And then there is this point, maybe after 2 hours, or I don't know, maybe 2 sessions, and then they talk about this. And then we can work on this gender transformative thing to say, okay, what are our alternatives? So like this method I showed before, there are different boys in group and they don't say the same thing. So we can connect it to each other, and they have different answers and help each other in a way. It's just short thing. Thank you.
I saw another question. I'm just trying to locate it.
I think there's a question for Philippe.
I thought so too. Tyrone, is it possible for you to read it out? I'm not being able to locate it. Thank you.
Philippe, do you think the prevalence of porn is undoing lots of the good work being done? Not necessarily in the same individuals, but overall in societies. And this is from Sarah.
It's a big topic. When we come into the workshops, a lot of boys talking about this stuff and say what they see. And the younger they are shy, of course. And they say, yeah, I know it. Yeah, everyone has a smartphone and it's so fast to get into porn stuff. And we have to talk about this. We have to show up what happens inside this industry. It's a form of industry as well. And that women and girls are the big losers in this stuff. And boys and men, of course, too, because they develop a sexuality that is not very healthy. It's not their own sexuality. It's a form of artificial sexuality. As you know, when we were kids, we saw some film in the cinema, and then we play after it. And it's very similar to this stuff. And it's not reality. I know there are a lot of forms of pornography, but mainly it's violence against women. And this we have to talk about. And one door sometimes is when say, okay, think of it, this is your sister or your mother. Do you like it? And they say, no, I will kill this guy. I think, come on, you act like others and see that it's a problem. So you have to change your behavior. I don't know if it's a good answer. It's my thoughts about this.
I just so I have a bit of a different understanding, I'd say, where while I do recognize that a lot of pornographic material can seem very violent, can also be perceived as violent, but I think to also recognize the fact that the conversations of sexuality often doesn't happen, especially with adolescents, unless and until it's through the language of abuse or through the language of violence. I think that even pornography itself is often seen as that, but there can be erotic material, if we also don't want to call it pornography perhaps for different reasons. There can be erotic material that actually can be very sexually liberating for some people, but the notion is, I think, in how we view pornography and what we make of it, because sometimes often we use the language of pornography to couch it, or to rather talk about it only in the context of violence, and which therefore sometimes also ends up giving or creating a certain stigma around sexuality, which then becomes that if there is someone who doesn't believe in the the regular missionary position of activities, therefore then is perhaps not a good woman or a good person. So those are some things that also we might want to consider while we do talk about erotic material. Just a thought I'm putting on the table.
If I may be permitted to add to that, I think the whole notion, and Philippe started off his response by hitting the nail on the head for me by saying it's a big topic, because pornography is a big topic and there are so many different perspectives, and not all gender activists will have the same perspective about it. Neither will anybody in a particular program feel the same way about it. Sometimes it can be personal, sometimes it can be public, sometimes it can be political. In our program, and I like how Pauline added to that, because in our program, we don't start off with the notion of pornography being seen as something negative or sinful or a crime or that kind of thing. Rather, we go into a deeper probing of the rationale for pornography in the lives of these young boys and men. And basically, we have that discourse and that question and answer and probing and critical thinking to dovetail into their awareness of the role pornography plays in their life. And based on that, is it something good to continue? Is it something that you could change? Is there something that you can temper somewhat? So we don't instill, but rather facilitate the discussion and hear the perspectives and hear the points of view and let boys shape their own notion of how they should go on and what they can do and what they should continue. But chief among it all, and we even, and Pauline spoke about the missionary position, we also engage in notion of gender and sexuality being so diverse. There are multiplicity of gender identities and sex identities. So it's not only a heteronormative discussion, but one that speaks to the communities of heteronormative and non-heteronormative identities, and let boys speak, because we are dealing with boys and adolescents, and this is a natural part of growing up. So let them speak, let us hear from them, and more importantly, let them come to the realization of what might be helpful regarding porn and what might hinder regarding porn. The benchmark that we use is to keep them on the narrow in terms of how does it impact women and girls negatively, and how does it impact other boys and men negatively. If so, anything negative must require change. So we don't make up their minds for them, but we allow them to reach that position as individuals.
I also want to share two methods. Thank you for your video tips. I use them as well. It's really good. And it's funny because the first time they laugh about this story with the T consent, and afterwards they recognize what's the problem in a way. And two short methods I want to share with you is one is steps to relationship. What are the steps to relationship? Boys talk maybe to each other, as I did when I was a boy, but to talk with adults, it's very important to say, okay, what are the steps? To talk to somebody, you ask after the phone number, and what happens to have sex, for example? What is the consent thing? And you just take a few stations, and they have to put it in a direction to say, okay, this stations I want to have to become in a relationship. I also can just have only sex, but there are more stages to become a relationship maybe, and to discuss this. And the other thing is, because you talked before that, is the difference between erotic or relationship and porn. And this is very interesting as well, because so the boys see it, they can see it on the board. Okay, this is porn and this is relationship. And do you think that girls or women like this? What you written up, or like this? And I think that's very important to put it on the table. Thank you. We have quite more questions.
Thank you everyone for a lot of suggestions and links to videos and resources coming in. Thank you. I think we have a couple minutes more before we run out of our time. So if anyone has any questions or...
Well, it's not a question, but I will just give a comment that this entire symposium has been extremely wonderful and beneficial to all of us. It not only validates our work wherever we are under this big blue sky, it doesn't only help us to affirm ourselves and the role that we play in gender activism, in the drive for gender justice and gender equality, but it actually, as individuals, but it actually creates a bond among us, and let us be aware that sometimes when we ourselves, the activists, encounter challenges, or when we feel a bit disillusioned with the success that doesn't come the way we anticipated, or certainly not at the rate it comes, it feels good to know that there are other people elsewhere across this world that are on the same path with us. And the conference, I was part of the Men Engage conference, the last one in India, and that really was mind-blowing. It's so sad that the pandemic prohibited us from being in Kenya physically, but even with this pandemic, this conference, this symposium has been so successful and has allowed voices and has allowed perspectives to be aired. And I for one, am grateful for it. I am exceedingly thankful that I've been in the panel that I've been in with my colleagues. We've learned, we've grown, and I don't think this is the end, although this is the end of the presentation. It's not the end of our camaraderie and our moving on, but it just makes me feel good that in the drive for gender justice, I'm not alone, you are not alone, we're together, and regardless of the rates of success, we continue because our boys need it and our girls rely on it. So thank you to everyone for everything.
Thank you, Tyron, for your words. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everyone. This has been really great. Learning for me as well.